Hello, everyone. Welcome to X Chapter Channel. This week I have a very special guest, a friend who actually grew up next door to me in the United States, and he has actually never lived in Japan or spent a lot of time here. But I thought that it actually might be an interesting angle this week to talk with someone about their impressions and their ideas about Japan, who really doesn't have a close connection or a connection that has been built by living in the country. So clear the ladies from the room. Here's my friend Vahid Sadrzadeh.
Hey guys. Hey Paul, how are you?
I'm excellent, and you look well. I hope everything is fine where you are.
The coronavirus has forced me to rearrange some of my basement here, so it's been not all bad, but no, it's been good. We're doing well here. Our state is just actually reopening, believe it or not, and so we're kind of in the early stages of that. So we're doing well.
I understand. I remember this really vaguely from when we were kids, but you did visit Japan at one point. That's correct?
That is correct. So let's go back into the memory bank here. 1990 is when my family and I visited Japan, and I have to tell you, Paul, still from what I remember of the trip, obviously when you're 10 years old, it's a lot different than taking a trip when you're 40, right? I mean, you experience different things, you look at it from a different viewpoint, but we landed in Tokyo, and then we proceeded to take the train all the way south. So we spent 2 weeks traveling the country by rail: Nagasaki, Osaka, Hiroshima, and from what I remember, it is an absolutely beautiful country. The food scene is remarkable, and I think my taste buds would agree now that I would love to try the food now as opposed
Mm-hmm.
to, when I was 10 years old. Um, but I can imagine in that 30 years, have they changed, or have they, I don't know. And that's what I'm really looking forward to, and seeing it from a different perspective.
Well, it certainly has changed, and I know you've kept up with things a little bit. It's certainly as a with your job in the media, you keep the tabs on what's going on in the world, and having me living here, and you probably follow, seen things that I do on Facebook and watching X Chapter Channel, that the videos I put out. So
All the
I'm
time.
curious. Well, first of all, you were planning a trip to come here, right?
Yeah, so we were actually planning to come this past spring. So in March of 2020, obviously the coronavirus derailed that. Uh, but we're still planning on coming in 2021 in the springtime. Uh, and we're hopeful that travel would be a little easier by then, but we'll have to see.
At current, you can't actually enter Japan from the United States. I feel like by next year, those sorts of restrictions will be a thing of the past, and I think opening up is going to be more and more the norm. So I want to ask you, what sort of expectations might you have, or image that you have of Japan when you get here? What do you expect to find, see, eat? You mentioned the food.
I just think culture wise, I'm really looking forward to it. And that's, when I go on any trip, that's what I want to immerse myself in, is the culture. And I think you have to somewhat get away from the big cities in order to do that. I mean, that's, I don't know that you find a lot of diverse populations in New York City and LA, but do you truly find what the United States is about if you're visiting New York City? I don't know. Um, and I found that to be the case when we visited Morocco a year and a half back. You have to get away from some of those bigger cities in order to really experience what the country is all about. And that's what I'm looking forward to Japan. Well, I'm looking forward to going to Tokyo and the food scene and kind of the nightlife. I'm really looking forward to getting away from the big city and really seeing the day to day of what families see on their end and what they experience, because I think that's how I truly like to experience countries. And that's what I'm looking forward to most about visiting Japan. Well, of course, the food. I mean, I, I don't know if you're gonna find anybody else that likes food more more than me. That's why I'm that fake athlete. I got to
You,
make
you
up for those calories somewhere. But I want to see the markets firsthand, right? I want to see and experience the food culture. I mean, that's such a huge part of living there. I'm assuming is
Mhm.
part of that food culture, and that's really another aspect that I'm looking forward to. Was that a change for you? I guess maybe a question for you. Was that a change for you, shifting how you looked at food culture and what maybe you consumed day in and day out?
Well, one of the things you quickly learn when you come to Japan is how proud local areas are of their local produce and certain foods that have developed a local history, that it might be a food you can find just about anywhere in Japan, but the way they do it locally is just different enough that they take a pride in their version of the Japanese food. Where I lived in the countryside, their famous local food was udon, the big white flour noodles. And udon is a staple you can find anywhere in Japan, and you can get it in Japanese restaurants in the States as well. But this udon was thicker, far more chewy, and basically, having eaten that for 3 years while I was living there, I can't go back to ordinary udon now. It's those sorts of scenes are everywhere in Japan.
Things I'm looking forward to the most, honestly, is that food scene and just getting to experience those little shops that you were, the restaurants and kind of the little spots, that are hidden away from, the main streets. I think that's what defines a food scene. For me, it's just kind of like the aspect of, hey, like you really find more about a culture and a nation when you're not in the bright lights and the big cities or whatever. And that's how I feel about the food scene too. You really experience what people are experiencing when you go beyond those main streets, and that's what I'm looking forward to.
Well, I've always put it this way, that no one does back alleyway food and drinking culture like Japan. I mean, and that's kind of the thing, that even if you're in the Tokyo mega city, you can still discover these gems that are off the beaten track and are
Mhm.
not gonna see a lot of tourists, even because there's just so much there, and there's such a vast variety of possibilities.
And kind of what I've learned about traveling over the course of the last decade, I guess, is you always try and squeeze in as many places as you can in 2 weeks, right? I mean,
Hmm.
that's really what I experienced as a kid. Hey, let's go to Switzerland and France and try to hit up every town every single day. I mean, you don't learn anything about a culture or community if you do that, unfortunately. And
Hmm.
you just want to like cram in as many spots as you can. But I think what I've learned over the last decade is, why do that, right? I mean, you're not going to learn anything um, valuable by doing that, and you're not going to experience as much. So I think for us, and for me particularly, not spending time traveling half the time is something that's valuable to me. Going somewhere and parking it for 3 days or 4 days, and maybe experiencing only 2 or 3 cities instead of trying to experience 10 cities in 2 weeks.
I think that's smart as well. I mean, I understand why people cram in a lot, because Japan is far away and it's pretty expensive to get
Sure.
to. So it's you have this feeling that you really want to get the most for the time and money spent, because it's not unless you are living in Asia, it's not the easiest place to get to. So I understand that completely, but I think you're right that that there's definitely a benefit to slowing down and spending a little more time, and you get a feeling for a place more completely than you would if you're bouncing from town to town. And you might get a in that situation you might get a feeling about how the different places in Japan seem to be different from each other at first blush, but it'll be only a surface level of understanding.
Hmm. I think Kyoto is big on our list. I think that's some place that we would love to spend a little time in, and also exploring Mount Fuji. I think for me personally, I think that is the surrounding area and Mount Fuji itself. I think that's somewhere that I really would like to spend a few days exploring.
Well, it's Hey everybody, thank you very much for watching. From here on, Vahid and I segue into talking about vlogging and gear that we use for our filming. So I decided to make that into another episode that I'm going to release a couple of weeks from now. So this first episode is focusing just on Vahid dreams of Japan and the kind of travel he wants to do and what he wants to experience while he's here. And I want to thank you for experiencing this video and watching all the way to the end. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. Watch for my new content that comes out every single Friday. And thank you again for watching this one. Catch you next week.